This is a story you'll definitely want to hear to the very end. Chapter 1. The Museum of My Concessions. The problem with my sister Chloe was always her ironclad self-assurance. When she was 10, she coveted my bicycle, and I surrendered it. When she was 15, she set her sights on my room, and I dutifully moved my things. It was always easier to capitulate than to fight. She had a way of rendering all resistance meaningless. You ask why I didn't fight back? Oh, but I tried. Once. I must have been 7, and our mother had bought us identical porcelain dolls. Mine had blue ribbons, hers had pink. Within a week, Chloe declared that pink was a color for simpletons, whereas she was a person of royal bearing, and it was only fitting that she have the doll with ribbons as blue as the sky. I refused. I clutched my doll so tightly my little fingers went white. Chloe didn't scream. She just looked at me with her enormous cornflower blue eyes, which held not a shadow of malice, only a cold, glacial bewilderment, as if I were a peculiar insect that had violated the laws of nature. And then she took her own doll and, with methodical calm, smashed its porcelain head against the fireplace mantel. Shards flew everywhere. Mother, rushing in at the sound, saw a weeping Chloe standing over the wreckage, and me, frozen, with my whole dolls still in my hands. The conclusion was drawn instantly. I was punished for being hard-hearted and selfish. That evening, as I swallowed my tears and brought her my doll, Chloe accepted it with a faint, condescending smile. She didn't say thank you. She said, "That's better." On that day, I understood. The world was not built on fairness, but Chloe had her own personal universe where justice bent and buckled, submitting to her will. Our parents, gentle and laughably intellectual people, were the first and most devoted acolytes of her cult. Chloe was their masterpiece. Golden-haired, quick to laugh, with dimples on her cheeks and a steel rod for a spine. I, on the other hand, was just there, a quiet, inconspicuous shadow, a function designed to smooth the sharp corners my sister created. In school, if Chloe wanted to befriend the most popular girl, and that girl already had a best friend, Chloe didn't resort to schemes. She simply approached and informed the girl of her desire, and within a week, the new friend was carrying Chloe's books, her former allegiances forgotten. Her confidence was hypnotic. She didn't ask. She informed the universe of her requirements, and the universe meekly complied. Years passed. I became a walking museum of my concessions to Chloe. This scar on my knee is a memento from climbing the tallest tree in the park to prove to her beau that I wasn't a coward, while she stood below laughing. This habit of drinking coffee without sugar is because Chloe once declared sugar to be poison and threw out the entire sugar bowl. I gave up my piano lessons because the sound interfered with her concentration on her own beauty. I gave her my prom dress because on her it looked historically correct. Every sacrifice I made was not perceived as a sacrifice. It was the natural order of things. I was a supplier of resources for her magnificent life, a nameless worker in the factory of her happiness. And the most terrifying part was that I had almost come to terms with it. Self-pity had become my second skin. Sometimes at night, I would lie awake and sift through all those moments, and a righteous anger, impotent and bitter as wormwood, would boil inside me. It would scald my throat, but by morning, it always cooled, leaving only the taste of ash. I told myself that one day things would change. One day, something would appear that I wouldn't give away. Something so mine that the very thought of losing it would make me finally clutch it in a death grip, like that long ago doll with the blue ribbons. I just didn't know then that this something wouldn't be a thing. This something would be a person, and that when Chloe set her sights on him, I wouldn't just have to smash a doll against the mantel. I would have to burn our entire world to the ground. Chapter 2: A Fragile Equilibrium. An escape. That's what I called my move to another city. At 23, with a degree in a thoroughly unremarkable field, I packed 2 suitcases and drove 200 miles away from home. Not for a career or grand ambitions, for oxygen. I needed to breathe air that hadn't been pre-approved by my sister's lungs. The first few months were like a rehabilitation. I discovered with astonishment that I could buy yellow curtains from my apartment and no one would tell me they were tacky. I could listen to the same song for hours and no one would burst into the room demanding I'd turn off that awful noise. I was learning to make decisions, small, domestic ones. Which cheese to buy, whether to go to the movies or the park. Each such decision was a tiny victory, a brick in the wall I was trying to build between myself and the past. It was in this new, quiet world that I met Ethan. He was an architect, a man as solid and calm as an old brick house. He had none of the destructive charisma that Chloe possessed. His strength was of a different kind, a constructive one. He built bridges, designed buildings, and in his spare time, he assembled incredible miniature models of sailing ships from wood. He spoke slowly, considering each word, and he listened as if my thoughts were the most important blueprint in his life. With him, for the first time, I felt not like a shadow, but like a separate, whole being. He loved me. Not for any particular reason, but in spite of everything. He loved my insecurity, my quiet stories about a childhood in which Chloe was always just a blurred background figure. My habit of apologizing for everything under the sun. "You're like a rare bird that's afraid to spread its wings," he told me once, gently tucking a stray strand of hair behind my ear. "But I'm willing to wait as long as it takes." We were together for 2 years. 2 years of absolute, almost unreal happiness. We rented a cozy apartment with a large balcony where he set up his workshop and I my flower garden. I found a quiet, peaceful job at the local library. Life fell into a rhythm, and the ghost of my sister seemed to have finally dissolved into the past. We announced our engagement. I called my parents, and while they were happy, of course, I could hear the anxiety in my mother's voice. "Have you told Chloe yet? She'll be so surprised." Chloe was indeed surprised. She called me the next day. Her voice held no joy, only a businesslike curiosity, as if I had announced the purchase of a new refrigerator. "An architect? Interesting. I'll have to take a look at him. We'll come for the weekend." Not may we come, but will come. She and her latest admirer, a man as faceless and interchangeable as all the ones before him. I felt that familiar chill run down my spine. I told Ethan. He just laughed. "Darling, what are you so afraid of? She's just your sister. I'm sure we'll get along." Oh, my sweet, naive Ethan. He didn't know that just my sister was a natural disaster disguised as an angel. They arrived on Saturday morning. Chloe fluttered out of the car, the same as ever, radiant, impeccable, in an expensive cashmere coat that I was sure had been a gift from the very same companion who now dutifully trailed behind her with the suitcases. She swept our apartment with a quick, appraising glance, her eyes lingering on my yellow curtains. "Bold," she remarked. And that single word contained so much condescension, I wanted to rip them down immediately. And then she saw Ethan. He came out of the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel, smiling, a little shy. Chloe froze for a fraction of a second. I saw it. No one else would have noticed, but I knew her better than I knew myself. I saw how her cornflower blue eyes darkened for an instant, like a predator spotting its prey. She glided toward him, extending a hand. "Chloe, it's so good to finally meet you. Anna has told me so much, and yet so little about you." Her voice was pure honey, but I could taste the venom in it. The entire evening she was the embodiment of charm. She laughed at Ethan's jokes, marveled at his model ships, and told amusing stories from our shared childhood in which I was portrayed as a sweet but laughably clumsy eccentric. Ethan was captivated. "You have a wonderful sister," he whispered to me when we went to bed. "So vibrant, so full of life. Why are you so afraid of her?" I said nothing. I just laid there, listening to Chloe's soft, melodious laughter behind the wall of the guest room. And I knew that my small, fragile world had just developed a crack. The hunt had begun. Chapter 3. The Last Straw. Chloe did not leave after 2 days. Her admirer was dispatched back home under the pretext of a sudden migraine, while she herself announced that she desperately needed a change of scenery and that sweet Ethan wouldn't mind if she stayed with us for another week or two. Ethan, of course, did not mind. He was enchanted. He saw not a manipulator, but an unhappy girl with a broken heart who needed support. My timid objections were met with a reproachful look. "Anna, she's your sister. How can you be so inhospitable?" Thus began my personal hell. Chloe transformed our apartment into a stage for her one-woman show. She would wake up before anyone else to brew Ethan a special coffee from a recipe she had supposedly found in an old French book. She would accidentally greet him coming home from work wearing one of my silk robes, which, of course, fit her 100 times better. She would engage him in long conversations on the balcony about lofty things, about architecture and art, dropping quotes that I knew she had hastily memorized the night before. There was no place for me in these conversations. When I tried to join in, Chloe would gently but firmly cut me off. "Anna, darling, don't interrupt. We're talking about things that wouldn't interest you." And Ethan said nothing. He would look at me with pity, as one looks at a child trying to participate in an adult conversation. Laughter, pity, and righteous anger, these 3 emotions were tearing me apart. I found it absurdly funny how clumsily and obviously she operated, and how blind Ethan was. I pitied myself to the point of tears for my stolen happiness, for my world crumbling before my very eyes. And I was choking in a righteous anger, black and viscous. Anger at her, at him, at my parents, at the entire world that had allowed Chloe to become what she was. She began to undermine my authority in small ways. If I cooked dinner, she would add some secret spice, and Ethan would marvel, "Chloe, you turn any meal into a masterpiece." If I suggested we see a romantic comedy, she would laugh. "Oh, our Anna is such a sentimental soul. Ethan, let's go see that Scandinavian art house film you wanted to see instead." She rearranged the furniture to create more space. hung her own photos in our frames to liven up the interior. She wasn't pushing me out. She was erasing me from my own life, like a stray mark on a perfect blueprint. I tried to talk to Ethan. I pleaded. I cried. I tried to prove that it was all a performance. He would listen, nod, hug me, and say, "Darling, you're just stressed about the wedding. You're exaggerating. Chloe loves you very much. She's just so energetic." He didn't believe me. My quiet truth could not compete with her loud, radiant lie. The last straw came on the evening we were supposed to have dinner with his parents. It was an important meeting. I had spent 3 days choosing a dress, rehearsing answers to possible questions, my stomach churning with anxiety. An hour before we had to leave, I discovered the dress was gone. And then Chloe emerged from the bathroom in my dress. It fit her like a glove, accentuating every curve of her perfect figure. To my silent, horrified question, she answered with a disarming smile. "Anna, I was just trying it on. But my God, it's as if it were made for me. It's a little tight on you in the chest anyway. Don't be mad, okay? I didn't mean any harm." At that moment, Ethan walked into the room. He stopped in the doorway, staring at Chloe. And in his gaze, I saw no condemnation. I saw admiration, pure, unadulterated admiration of a man looking at a beautiful woman. Then he turned to me, still standing there in my old house coat, and said with a note of irritation, "Anna, we're going to be late. You're not ready yet? Maybe Chloe should come with us. At least she's ready." That was it. Not the stolen dress, not Ethan's admiring gaze. It was that phrase, "At least she's ready." It contained everything: my defeat, his betrayal, her triumph. In that instant, something inside me snapped. The tears dried before they could fall. The anger cooled, hardening into a block of ice in my chest. The pity evaporated. I looked at them, at the radiant Chloe and my confused, weak fiancé, and for the first time in my life, I felt nothing. Absolutely nothing. A void. And in that void, a plan was born. Crystal clear and as cold as a surgeon's scalpel. I nodded calmly and said, "Of course, go on without me. I'm not feeling well." I closed the door behind them, walked to the mirror, and stared at my reflection for a long time. The quiet, frightened Anna was gone. In her place was a woman who had everything taken from her, and a woman who has everything taken from her has nothing left to lose, and she is capable of anything. Chapter 4. Still Waters Run Deep. My revenge could not be loud. Chloe thrived on drama. She flourished in scandals and open confrontations. Any screams or accusations from my side would only have confirmed the image she had created of the unstable, jealous sister. No, my weapon had to be quiet, like a poison that takes time to work. My weapon had to be her own self-assurance. The next day, the performance began. I became exactly who they wanted me to be. Broken, pathetic, crushed. I stopped eating, barely leaving the bedroom. To all of Ethan's questions, I responded with quiet sobs and incoherent mumblings about how I ruined everything and was not good enough for him. Ethan, consumed by guilt, smothered me with overprotective care. He brought me broth, read to me aloud, begged me not to fall apart. Chloe watched all this with ill-concealed triumph. She had won. I had surrendered, just like always. She even began to show me a demonstrative sort of sympathy, bringing me tea and patting my head as if I were a sick dog. "It's all right, Anna. Everything will be okay," she would coo, her eyes swimming with victory. They both relaxed. They thought the game was over. But it was just beginning. My first move was Ethan's computer. I knew all his passwords. At night, when the house was asleep, I would sit at his desk. I wasn't looking for compromising material. I was creating it. I set up an anonymous email account and began a correspondence with myself in the name of a fictional ex-girlfriend of Ethan's. In these emails, she begged him to come back, reminisced about their shared passion, and hinted at certain special predilections that I, his fiancée, supposedly knew nothing about. The emails were written in Chloe style, pushy, slightly overwrought, and full of drama. I didn't hide them. I simply left the email tab open as if I had accidentally forgotten to close it. Next, I worked on Ethan. During a rare moment of lucidity, I tearfully confessed to him. I told him a fabricated story about my difficult past, that in my youth, I had supposedly had a very domineering and cruel boyfriend who had suppressed and psychologically broken me, that he had been obsessed with me and had stalked me, and that Chloe was the only one who knew. I explained that her current behavior was a distorted form of concern, that seeing my weakness again, she was trying to protect me from Ethan, subconsciously seeing him as a threat. "She doesn't mean any harm, Ethan," I whispered, clutching his hand. "She's just afraid you'll hurt me, like the other one. She's trying to lure you away to save me. She's always had such strange methods." It was a stroke of genius. I didn't just justify her behavior. I gave it a sinister, unhinged quality. I transformed her from a cunning seductress into a psychologically traumatized savior with dangerous tendencies. The seed of doubt was planted. Ethan began to look at Chloe differently. Her flirtations now seemed less like playfulness and more like a symptom. Her concern felt like obsession. I staged the final act a week later. I knew Chloe had a copy of our apartment key, which she had made just in case. I casually mentioned to Ethan that I was planning to go to a friend's house in the country for the day to get my head straight. I knew Chloe wouldn't miss the chance to be alone with him. I left, but not for my friend's house. I sat in a cafe on the next street, watching the clock. At 7 in the evening, I sent Ethan a frantic text message. "Ethan, emergency! She contacted me. The ex. She says she knows where we live and she's on her way. I'm scared." And 5 minutes later, I called the police. In a weeping, breaking voice, I reported that an unknown woman was trying to break into my apartment, that she was stalking my fiancé, that she might be armed and was very unstable. I gave them my address. I returned home at the same time as the police patrol. The door was open. In the living room, I saw a scene worthy of a surrealist painter. Ethan, pale as a sheet, was cowering in a corner, and standing over him, trying to embrace him, was Chloe, wearing one of my most revealing nightgowns. She was saying something to him, probably more words about how she was the one he needed. To the police, who entered right behind me, it was all perfectly clear. A woman, crazed with passion, had broken into a home and was assaulting a man. My scream of, "That's her!" completed the composition. Chloe had no time to understand. For the first time in her life, her self-assurance failed her. She looked at me, at the police, at Ethan, and her face became a mask of horror and disbelief. As they led her away, struggling and shouting that it was all a misunderstanding, I ran to Ethan and collapsed into his arms. "It's over, my love," I whispered while looking over his shoulder at the departing police car. "We're safe now." Chapter 5. Queen of the Ruins. The consequences were exactly as I had calculated them: catastrophic for Chloe and triumphant for me. Of course, she was released from police custody a few hours later, but the story was already out in the world. Ethan, now thoroughly convinced of her instability, gave a statement that completely corroborated my version of events. He spoke of her obsessive behavior, the strange conversations, the way she had burst into the house in my lingerie. My prefabricated legend about the ex and Chloe's psychological trauma fell on this soil like seed on fertile ground. Ethan told our parents that Chloe had suffered a nervous breakdown fueled by jealousy and needed professional help. Any attempt by Chloe to justify herself, to explain what really happened, now sounded like the ravings of a madwoman. Her greatest weapon, her word, her unshakable confidence, had been turned against her. The more fiercely she argued her case, the crazier she appeared in the eyes of others. She lost everything. Ethan cut off all contact with her. Our parents looked at her with a mixture of pity and fear. Her friends, to whom the rumors had spread in the most distorted forms, began to avoid her. The world that had always bent to her will had suddenly become as hard as a concrete wall, and she had smashed into it at full speed. Her universe collapsed because for the first time, something had happened that did not conform to her will. Reality had refused to obey her. I, on the other hand, blossomed. I stopped being sick. I became the woman Ethan wanted me to be. Strong, a survivor of tragedy who had found the strength to move on. Our wedding was quiet but deeply touching. I walked down the aisle on the arm of a man I had deceived in order to keep. I looked into his loving eyes and felt not a shred of remorse, only a cold, icy satisfaction. I had gotten what I wanted. I had won. Pity, anger, laughter, all of it was in the past. Now there was only me. The last time I saw Chloe was 6 months after the wedding. I drove to her myself. She was living with our parents, rarely leaving her room, the very same room she had once taken from me. She had lost a lot of weight, her golden hair had turned dull, and her cornflower blue eyes held a look of perpetual bewilderment. Her former self-assurance was gone without a trace, leaving behind only a scorched desert. She sat in an armchair, wrapped in a blanket, staring at a single point on the wall. I entered without knocking. She flinched when she saw me. I was wearing an elegant pantsuit. My hair was perfectly styled, and I smelled of expensive perfume, a perfume she used to love. I silently walked around the room, her former sanctuary, now her prison. My gaze fell upon the dresser. On it sat a small carved wooden music box that her father had given her for her 18th birthday. She had always treasured it. I walked over, picked up the box, and turned it over in my hands. It felt heavy, substantial. "You know," I said softly, and my voice in the dead silence of the room was deafeningly loud. "I think I'll take this." Chloe looked up at me. There was no anger in her eyes, only confusion and a kind of animal fear. She opened her mouth, wanting to say something but couldn't. She just watched as I, without another word, turned and left, taking a piece of her past with me. I never opened that music box. It sits on my vanity like a trophy, a reminder, not of revenge, but of what I learned on the day I decided to fight back. That little girl clutching the doll with the blue ribbons hadn't died. She had just been biding her time. She had watched, learned, and gathered her strength. She understood that to defeat a monster, it's not enough to simply break its toy. You have to become a more terrifying monster. You have to destroy its world from the inside using its own rules. And my God, I turned out to be a very capable student. And now I fear nothing, because the most dangerous person is not the one who screams and makes demands. It's the one who smiles quietly while watching you dig your own grave. If you enjoyed the story, subscribe to the channel and you'll hear even more captivating tales.